All right, so final way of factoring. This is it today. This is the last method that we will be using to factor. So some of you are thinking, thank goodness, finally, we're done with factoring. Well, not quite done, because we have this last way to talk about, but this is the final way to talk about factoring. So on Monday and Tuesday, we were working on factoring with a special pattern called two squares pattern. And if we look at those problems, they were special because they were set up with two numbers and a variable with a minus sign. The patterns we're going to look at today are going to have three numbers in them. So we have a similar pattern or a similar form to that ax squared plus bx plus c that we were using with the AC grouping. Except we don't have to use AC grouping because, again, these numbers have a special pattern. And they are perfect squares, so still working with perfect squares, but they're trinomials. Trinomials means there are three terms. So the other pattern had binomials, which meant they had two terms. So these have three terms. So still perfect squares, so we're still taking square roots. So the first one, we have a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. When we factor that, there's going to be one parenthesis with a little square outside. If there's a plus sign in the problem, in the middle of the problem, then there's going to be a plus sign here in our parentheses. And we are still using square roots, but we're only using the square root of the first and the last number. And that's the a and the b. The middle number actually doesn't matter when we go with factoring it. It only comes up when we're foiling it. So if we would FOIL, we would get that middle number. But when we're factoring it, it isn't part of the factoring step or pattern. So if we look at the one underneath, the pattern underneath says a squared minus 2ab plus b squared. Well, notice there's a minus sign in the parentheses. So this is going to be a minus b. And then it's squared. So the big thing with this pattern is you need to see if there's a plus or a minus sign, because when we use our factoring pattern, there needs to be a plus if there's a plus, a minus if there's a minus. So looking right across at the example, this works the same way as above. We're ignoring the middle number. We're taking the square root of x squared. Well, that's our a. That's just x. We're taking the square root of 36. That's our b. And that's 6. And then that goes in as a. There's a plus sign, so we have a plus sign. And that a is x. And then b is 6. So x plus 6 and then squared. We're writing it squared because 6 times 6 squared is 36. X times x squared is, or x times x is x squared. So that's why we're writing that squared on the outside. The next one, again, square root of x squared is just x. The square root of 9 is 3. So our pattern, this is a minus, so here's a minus. The pattern is now a minus b. Well, that would be x minus 3 squared. Again, it's squared outside because x squared is x times x, or x squared is x squared, and 3 squared is 9. So we're going to factor this using those above patterns. And the big thing we're looking at is that middle symbol. So if it's a plus, I'm going to write one parenthesis with a plus sign and then a squared on the outside. So that's how my pattern is going to be set up. I take the square root of the first thing, which is m. The square root of the last one is 8. You're ignoring the middle. That only comes out when you FOIL it. So it doesn't have any part of the factoring pattern. So this is a plus b, or m plus 8, and then it's squared. And that's it. So looking at the next one, I see a plus sign. Right away I'm going to write my parentheses squared with a plus sign. And then the next step is to take the square root. Well, the square root of 9p squared is 3p. Square root of 9 is 3. The square root of p squared is 3, or is p. And then the square root of 25 is 5. So 3p plus, because it was plus, and then 5. Third one here, again, looking at the sign. That's the important part. Is it a plus or is it a minus? So now I have a minus with a parenthesis. Take the square root of the first and the last. The middle number doesn't matter when we factor it with the pattern. So the square root of 16. What times what makes 16? Well, that's 4. Square root of r squared is r. Square root of 49. 7 times 7 makes 49. So 4r minus 7. It's a minus because of the minus in the middle of the problem. That's the only thing that middle number does for us. It tells us if it's supposed to be a plus or a minus. All right, flipping over to page 37, looking at the next group of problems. Again, the key thing, is it a plus or a minus? We're following the same exact pattern. So I'm looking at h squared plus 20h plus 100. I see it's a plus sign. So before I do anything, I'm going to write plus, parentheses, squared. And then take the square root. Square root of h squared is h. Square root of 100, what times what makes 100? Well, that's 10. Use your calculator if you're not sure. H plus 10 squared. The one in the middle, here's a plus sign. Again, the 40 doesn't matter. It's the plus sign that we're worried about. Something plus something and then squared. So let's figure out what that something is. Taking the square root of 16 is 4. Square root of p squared is p. Square root of 25 is 5. So 4p plus 5 squared. The third one, there's a minus sign. So setting up my problem first, I'm placing a minus in the parentheses. And then square root of 9 is 3. Square root of n squared is n. Square root of 16 is 4. So 3n minus 4, or a minus b squared. So these work when we have 3 terms. All right, we got another example here. Just like we did, we got to factor out a GCF. Factor out the GCF. So first question, what is the GCF? What do they have in common? 5, negative 40, and 80. They're all divisible by 5. Use your calculator. Let that be helpful for you. So this is now 5 on the outside, u squared, minus 8u. 80 divided by 5 is 16. Cross off the first problem because we're ignoring it now. Here's a minus sign, so I need a minus sign in the parentheses. It's going to be squared. There was a GCF. That GCF needs to go in the front. And then finally, taking the square root of u squared, that's just u, square root of 16 is 4. So u minus 4 squared. Again, the 5 is in front. That was the GCF. It's a minus sign because there's a minus sign in the problem. And then it's u minus 4 squared. Second problem here. We have a 4, 24, and 36. GCF, what do they have in common? Well, I think they're all divisible by 4. So the GCF goes in front, and then divide. 4 divided by 4 is just m squared. 24 divided by 4 is a negative 6m. 36 divided by 4 is 9. Forget the first problem. Here's the GCF. I'm going to just set up my little setup step here. It's a minus because here's a minus, and I'm bringing down the 4. So that's just like my setup. And then I'm taking the square root of just the first and the last. So the square root of m squared is just m. The square root of 9 is 3. So m minus 3. All right, one more here. Letter C. GCF. We have a 4, a 32, and a 64. I think those guys are divisible by 4 again. So writing the 4 in front, 4 divided by 4 just gives us x squared. 32 divided by 4 is 8. 64 divided by 4 is 16. Use your calculator. Let it be your friend to help you with these problems. Plus sign in the middle of my parentheses. GCF in the front of my parentheses. And then, first problem is gone. We're looking at an x and a 4. So 4 in the front, x plus 4 squared. Alright, a couple checkpoint problems. If you look, 5 of them look the same. 1 of them is different. The one that's different is from the last 2 days. We can't use the same pattern because it is different from the others. So 8y squared minus 18. We're going to have to do that one differently because there's only 2 terms. It's a binomial. But all the others are like the pattern we just did. So looking at the first one, question 1, is there a GCF? Well, it's only x squared with a 1 in front, so no, there's not a GCF. Alright, well, then we need to just look at the plus. That means I have a plus in the problem, and it's going to be squared. If it was a minus, then I'd have a minus in the problem, and it would be squared. And then thinking about taking the square root, well, the square root of x squared is x. Square root of 25 is 5. X plus 5 squared. Second one, GCF, 4, 12, and 9. Well, 9 and 12 are divisible by 3. 4 and 12 are divisible by 4, but they're not all divisible by the same thing, so no GCF. Plus means plus in my answer. The square root of 4 is 2. The square root of x squared is x. The square root of 9 is 3. 2x plus 3 squared. Number 7, again, GCF, 9, 24, 16. So think, are they divisible by 3? Well, yeah, the first 2 are, but 16 can't divide by 3. Are they divisible by 4? 9 isn't divisible by 4. So no GCF. Second step, a minus sign. So my parentheses needs a minus sign, and it's squared. And now we think of what is the square root of 9? What is the square root of 16? Well, that's 4. So 3p minus, because there was a minus in the problem, 4 squared. All right, looking at number 8. First question, GCF. Ooh, 5, 10, and 5. This one has a GCF. All divisible by 5. So this one has a GCF. We're going to write that GCF out front. Divide by 5. 5 divided by 5 is just x squared. 10 divided by 5 is 2. 5 divided by 5 is 1. Ignore the first problem. It's gone. There's a plus, so we need a plus. There was a GCF, so we need a GCF. And now we take the square root. So the square root of x squared is just x. The square root of 1. What's the square root of 1? What times what makes 1? Only 1. So there is a square root of 1. It's just 1. So we factor this as x plus 1 and then squared. I'm going to skip number 9. We'll come back to that since it's different than the other 5. Looking at number 10. First question, what is the GCF? So think 12, 27, 36. What are they all divisible by? Maybe 3. So take the GCF out. 12 divided by 3 is 4. 36 divided by 3, is that 12? 27 divided by 3 is 9. First problem is gone. We now changed it. Getting my pattern set up, I notice a minus sign, so I need a minus sign in the parentheses. I had a GCF, so I need the GCF in the front of the parentheses. And then the last part here is to take the square root. So the square root of 4 is 2. The square root of 9 is 3. So this is 2u minus 3. And the GCF was in front. So all 5 of those problems were all trinomials. They had 3 parts. When it's a trinomial, it factors as these last 2 problems factored, with either a plus or a minus sign and something squared. Number 9 that I skipped over is called a binomial. And when it's a binomial, it is the difference of 2 squares pattern, and that was a squared minus b squared. That factored as a plus b and a minus b. So now you're going to have to look to see what pattern is it. Are there 2 terms? Are there 3 terms? When there's 2 terms, you get 2 parentheses. When there's 3 terms, you only have 1 parenthesis. So we have an 8 and an 18. I'm pretty sure there's a GCF there. So first question, what's the GCF? Well, I think they're divisible by 2. So we're going to divide by 2. Here's my GCF, taking it out. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 18 divided by 2 is 9. Right, done with the first part. Second step, we now need to try and factor this with this binomial perfect square pattern. So still taking the square root. All of them are the square root of the first number and the last number. But in this case, our pattern is going to say something plus and something minus. The GCF goes in front. So I write the pattern first, really, before I do anything else, so I can kind of get in my mind what the answer is going to look like. So square root of 4 is 2. Square root of 9 is 3. Notice right next door we had the square root of 4 and the square root of 9, but the answer is going to be different because the original problem was set up differently. So this pattern is a binomial of 2 squares. So 2y plus 3, 2y minus 3. So you can see the difference between the 2 answers. So that is all of your homework for today. You had to watch the video and answer the questions throughout the video. You're done with math today if you watch the video. Tomorrow we will have a worksheet similar to the checkpoint, where you're going to have different types of problems, sometimes 3 numbers in the problem, a trinomial, other times 2 parts to the problem, a binomial. Again, just like Monday and Tuesday, I will be working through a couple of the problems on the worksheet, so there'll be a short video for you to watch tomorrow, and in that video it'll show you how to do a couple of the problems from the worksheet. And then tomorrow's homework will be to finish the rest of the worksheet. So pretty much it's going to be set up, you have notes to watch one day and a homework practice worksheet to do the next day. And then we're looking at having a quiz after our little spring break. It'll probably be on Wednesday the 15th. Have a great day.